Welcome back to Digital Trends Live. We broadcast live every weekday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, bringing you tech headlines, interviews, conversations, and educating you and letting you know what's going on in the world of tech. And it is time for our weekly segment here where we do just that. I'm Greg Nibbler and joined now by Ken Yeung from Flipboard. Hello, Ken.
Hey, Greg. Nice to see you again.
Thanks for joining us. This is Tech Briefs, and Ken and I want to bring you up to date and kind of recap some of the big things of this week. And I think the biggest story overall has got to be what's going on with Huawei and this huge fight and this huge issue that's happening with them. I mean, you have Huawei. It started off with the U.S. government issuing basically a warning against any U.S. companies getting involved with them. And then they kind of rolled that back a little bit. But then jumping on board, you have Google, you have Qualcomm, you have Intel, all essentially saying that they're not going to work with Huawei. I mean, what is going on with this?
Yeah, so a lot of changes have happened in the past week since Trump announced his executive order preventing U.S. companies from doing business with a select number of Chinese-based or foreign adversaries businesses, that including Huawei. Huawei says, look, we're not going to be impacted by this ban, but yet, and so the Commerce Department has kind of rescinded the executive order or made a slight tweak to it, so to allow a 90-day access to technology, to American technology. So at the right now where we're at is that you're right. Google, Qualcomm, Broadcom, ARM, Intel, Microsoft, EE, Vodafone, and a bunch of other major companies have said, look, we're no longer going to be doing business with Huawei. I think the biggest impact was Google. Google announced over the weekend that it was going to not allow Android and its technology to be used by Huawei. And if you look at it with more than 2 billion devices worldwide that are using Android, that is a big hit to Huawei. So, I mean, we're right now in this point where Huawei's like, they're still holding true to the form, saying we're not going to experience any negative impact by this. We're still going to be proceeding as intended. They even launched their Honor phone earlier this week with the mention of Android on it. So that was positively received by the press, but it still has people cautious about whether or not they're still going to be able to use that phone once the ban takes effect. So you're also looking at Huawei saying, look, we're not worried about Android's ban. We're going to launch our own, and right now it's called Project Z. It's their Plan B, and at this point they need to move forward with Plan B because otherwise they're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's going to be enough, like coming up with, because they've worked on their own operating system before, and whether they can come up with something to come anywhere near what Google does. But they are the number 2 manufacturer of phones in the world. And I think a lot of people in the U.S. forget about that. Apple's 3, Samsung's 1, and then it's Huawei. So, I mean, it's a huge, huge company that has a lot of influence over a lot of different things. But where it ends up, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see over the next maybe couple of weeks, maybe a month, whether some of these regulations and maybe the overall implication of the U.S.-Chinese tariff war kind of simmers down. Maybe that will roll back some of these restrictions. But right now they're in some trouble, and they have a lot.
Earlier today, like just actually before we jumped on this segment, I believe one of the Huawei executives is appealing for international support, even comparing this ban to being like the Berlin Wall. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that are suggesting that tech is that the conflict between the U.S. and China in terms of the trade war is the equivalent of a Cold War. So, I mean, this is seriously going to escalate. So, who knows what's going to happen in terms of how technology is going to be impacted.
Well, it's a lot to follow along, and Flipboard and Digital Trends are both covering this a lot as the information comes out, which is constantly, like you said, right before we just went on air with this, there's new stuff coming out. Moving on to a couple other big things this week. I think something that we definitely saw was a theme from both Amazon and Comcast are the rumors that they're both working on devices that will read emotions, reading the emotions of the users. Amazon's is a wearable, supposedly, that they've been working on for a while, a wearable that would be able to tell via your voice if you're angry or sad or happy or bored or different sets of emotions. And then with that data, who knows, tailor advertising to you, change the music if you're feeling upset. There's all kinds of different things. And Comcast is working on something that's similar to that, I believe, that would read your emotions as well. I think the bigger implication is, what do they do with that data? Like the fact that they're able to analyze that and know that about you, and does that cross our comfort zones, I guess? Like, how do you feel about it?
Well, I think it's two different things. Like the actual consumer benefit is kind of like interesting. On one hand, I mean, both Comcast and Amazon, they are doing something beyond voice, but they're kind of two different areas, right? Well, let's stick with Comcast first. Comcast, earlier it was reported that Comcast would come out with some sort of Alexa-enabled health monitoring device. They have those reports have since been amended and Comcast has come out and said, look, this is not going to be an Alexa style type of thing. It's going to be a monitoring a device that'll be in homes, and it's going to it's not going to allow you to do the hey Alexa activate blah 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 or do whatever. It is simply to monitor if somebody may have fallen or anything like that. So it's more about well-being from what I've gathered. And so I think that's actually kind of interesting. If you look at Comcast's whole push around the smart home, this is actually going to be interesting for those that have elderly people in the household, in nursing homes or in hospitals, those type of things, to kind of monitor the well-being of those who may not be able to get around so well. Now you look at Amazon. Amazon is completely different. And you're right. They're talking about more about emotion, and this could be a wearable device, whether it's on your wrist or wherever, and it's going to be able to monitor how are you feeling, what sentiment are you going through right now, and so if I happen to be like right now, like very excited to have this conversation, at the end I might go home or I might go back to my desk, and Alexa or somebody or another Amazon enabled device might say, hey, let me play this music for you, or let me show some recommendations for a book or some other product that might be interesting to you, or here's a movie about blah 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 that is related to how you're feeling right now. So it's just going to help further Amazon's whole recommendation push, in my opinion, right now. But there's additional use for that technology, for that data as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I suppose the Comcast side of things, I was looking at it more as the emotional side, because it will read, your tone of voice. It's supposedly some of those things. But yeah, I mean, the wellness side, that is good. That's certainly a good application. And Amazon, one of their patents actually showcased that too, where a woman was like, oh, I don't feel well. And that Amazon recommended chicken soup for her. But I think it's just how that data is handled, and I think that's going to be one of the really big issues, because you can see the good that could come, but you can see a lot of issues with data security and how they manage that and what they're going to use it for. So yeah, we'll have to see where it goes, but definitely some interesting things when it comes to those pushes that we saw this week. I think the last thing we want to bring up too is just Elon Musk, always, making headlines. This week, though, a couple of successes. In particular, today, or actually it was yesterday, we'll talk about the boring tunnel first. So let's go to that. We'll talk about the boring tunnel. This was earlier this week. They had the approval from the LVCC, for the LVCC tunnel that's going to be going underneath that. It'll connect the South Hall to the new exhibit terminal that's going in there at LVCC. A pretty big success for them. $48 million contract. We're going to get to see it showcased, this tunnel, this rapid transportation. I think it goes 150 miles an hour, something along those lines. I think it's pretty cool. How do you feel about it?
Well, I think it's certainly an advantage, a win for Elon and the Boring Company. I mean, you're right. It's $48.6 million contract, but I think the Las Vegas is taking it from a conservative standpoint. Elon's not getting the full $48 million up front. It's going to be based off of milestones and paid off incrementally. So this is actually going to be a test for them. This is actually the Boring Company's first retail partner or retail client to execute this type of an endeavor. Now, they've also done things in Los Angeles, I believe in DC or in the Mid-Atlantic area, and also in Chicago. So, but those, are still under development for the most part. There are some that have been showcased previously. Look, I think they're anticipating this is going to be completed by the 2021 Consumer Electronics Show. And now, you've been to CES as well as I have, and that is a massive amount of people there, and just trying to get around is insane.
Yeah.
So if they can pull that off, great. More the merrier. And there's a lot of people that go to Vegas throughout the year, right? I mean, it's America's playground, right? So let's see how well they can execute that. And
yeah, I
time
mean,
will tell.
the potential there, if this goes really well, he also has the plans to spread it throughout Vegas, if this one works out. But having it there at the LVCC in particular, just because so many conventions, like you said, happen there, and getting that in front of so many different people to actually try it out, I think that's where you could see other governments, government entities or private entities start really utilizing it. I mean, it's going to be the perfect showcase spot.
Right.
I can't think of a better spot to showcase
Well, it's also
it.
probably going to minimize the impact to imagine doing that much construction on the Las Vegas Strip. That's
Right.
going to create absolute chaos. And so this is actually probably a pretty viable MVP right there. So it's like, hey, if we can have something that demonstrates success, especially around convention centers,
Yeah.
great. Now we can prove it on a much larger scale.
So that was one thing from Elon, the boring tunnel. And then the other thing I just wanted to bring up too is finally the SpaceX satellites for Starlink, their global internet plan. They finally were able to launch the first 60. They've been trying for the last couple of weeks, but weather and different issues came in. But the launch was successful. So we've got the first 60 of what's going to be 12,000 satellites in theory to create a mesh network that will provide broadband access globally, which is a really, really big issue. I mean, there's a lot of parts of the world don't have access to broadband internet. And if you think about that, what that actually means, economically and just connected to the world and understanding things, it's a huge issue. So I think this is a pretty important development in the grand scheme if it continues on. But it's also starting up this new internet space race that we're going to be having because Amazon wants to get involved, Facebook wants to get involved, a company called OneWeb, which I think is bankrolled by SoftBank, wants to get involved. That's a lot of satellites that are going to be up there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is actually, like as you mentioned, Facebook and Google have tried this in very different ways. Facebook with their Aquila drone, and now Google has their Project Loon as well. And many of them, many projects don't seem to have succeeded, but this is actually one of the first times that you start to see satellites in low orbit. Now, this is, I believe, it's like 200 some miles above the Earth, above the Earth. So, I mean, this is actually going to be able to cover a lot more. Regular geospatial satellites that are out there now are tens of thousands of miles above us. So they can only cover a small part of the world. And they don't have enough time to recalibrate to address the needs of whether it's the military, whether it's government, whether it's commercial use or personal use. So this is actually going to make it a little bit more better for people to have greater access worldwide. Now, I think as you said, this is the third time that Elon's tried this. The first time was for weather, the second time was for software, so third time's a charm. Now, this is just the first stage of these Starlink satellites. So eventually, are we going to start to see like our science classes start to change? So now no longer are we saying, hey, look, here's the Big Dipper, or here's this other constellation. Now here's the Starlink constellation full of satellites beaming down the internet to you. I mean, it's kind of a very, very interesting time right now. And, the greater access we have to the internet, I think the better. But of course, there's also things we have to worry about, like who's actually controlling the internet that's being powered through what SpaceX is doing. And, do we want to give them greater control over what we have access to?
It's kind of the Wild West now when it comes to the space race, just seeing where it's all going to end up. It's a lot to cover and a lot to talk about, and I just realized what time it is. So, Ken, I want to say thanks once again for joining us here every week for Tech Briefs, Flipboard, Digital Trends, bringing you up to date on everything that's been going on over the week, and follow up on both platforms for more information on everything. Ken, thanks a lot.
Thanks, appreciate it.